How's it going, everyone? We have a guest with us. Our guest today is Mirta. How are you?
Oh, I'm very good. Thank you.
Glad to hear that. So, how long have you been practicing for?
Like I said, I'm probably gonna be one of your most boring guests, only about 4 years. I know that you have interviewed people that had like 20, 30 years worth of experience.
Some people get more out of 4 years than others do out of 20. So, the time can be irrelevant sometimes. I just like to get a general idea. If you had said 3 days, that would sort of determine the types of questions as opposed to 3 or 4 years. So, no worries. And what got you interested in the first place?
Um, oh God, this is gonna be. I know that this is a very standard question, but the answer is very complicated because you can't really have a midlife crisis at 25. I don't think. Um, but effectively, my life went super downhill. I tried doing everything right. I tried living right, and I tried fitting into a very strict societal standard, the way that my parents would have wanted. I can't really say that that super changed, but I was in a job that I was not very happy in. I think it was more societal pressure than me actually deciding myself. Before that, I got a degree, and that wasn't something that I was super into. It was just something that I did because I had to. And my health was sliding downwards so significantly that I had to take a look and ask of how much time do I actually still have? And at that point, something flipped. And the flip was so extreme that it was like, well, fuck it. All of the things that I ever wanted to engage in, but thought that, oh, maybe it's irrational, maybe it's childish, who does those kind of things? Throw it at the wall. Just do it.
Yeah.
Just go with it and do it. And I went on Amazon and I bought a whole bunch of books that would be considered woo books. Just
hmm
all of the woo subjects imaginable because I just threw it all at the wall. I joined some Discord groups, I lurked around Reddit, and some things really stuck. Like,
Yeah.
some practices really, really stuck. And over time, I got super into mm, hard to explain spiritual communication.
hmm
But even before that, before the point where I threw everything at the wall, there has been signs that maybe actually things have been going on longer and before I even accepted communication, especially considering that there was one very odd dream that I now connect to my patron. And at the time, I was like, I asked the internet, going, I had a very, very weird dream. Can anyone even figure out what this was? And the internet was all like, oh, it must have been Jesus. Spoilers, definitely wasn't Jesus, but the,
Okay.
the dreams came even before the practice, but only when practice started did I actually notice that there were dreams that came before the practice. And
Uh-huh.
things kind of puzzle pieces came together. So that
Interesting.
is how I started.
I think a lot of us sort of go through that process because there is so much information and there are so many facets of esoteric philosophy or the occult. It's hard to know where to begin sometimes.
Just begin with everything, and then you'll figure out that there are things that you just don't like it. Like, I have a very big book on astrology. By the time I was done reading it, I was like, astrology is really not my thing. But I know because I tried.
Now you know. Absolutely. Yeah, so much of this is just about getting your feet wet and experiencing, like you said, what works for you personally. So, what are some of your favorite types of workings to do? You mentioned spirit communication a little bit.
Um, I'm primarily theistic Luciferian, and I practice demonolatry,
Okay.
which really in a day-to-day life expresses itself as well, I made some commitments. So every single day I will meditate and I will do a path working and I will connect to Lucifer, the spirit, as crazy as that sounds, but we're in an esoteric place. Let's not judge.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. For sure.
And for me, that is the crux of my spiritual practice. But that is not the be all end all, because I'm also
Mhm.
a professional tarot reader. So
Mhm.
that's another thing that I do spiritually. Sometimes I involve Black Mirror into my practice, but that's a more of a occasional thing rather than an absolutely everyday thing.
Sure.
And I also do, oh God, my brain. I do chaos works. That's chaos magic works. That's mostly when I actually need something rather than
Sure.
just the spiritual communication aspect. And
Okay.
sometimes I will do what I can only describe as spontaneous spell work,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
which doesn't even apply to chaos sigil stuff because it's more free form. And that seems
Mhm.
to go down pretty well. But once again, that is I need something to change in my life, and I
Mhm.
have a timeline to do it sort of
Um,
thing, that it is more of a I am living my life and I am spiritual sort of thing, which is more of my day-to-day practice.
that makes sense. Yeah, I love pathworking. Pathworking to me is one of the most transformative aspects of this art or science. It's a little bit of both. And I like where you're coming from, not from a super obsessive manifestation place. It's really about inner work, and a lot of times that inner work can bring about the physical change that you're wanting to manifest anyway. Yeah,
Yeah, a
I
lot of
totally.
it will be about your inner changes. It is hard to actually make external changes. There were
Mhm.
some very external changes that I did make.
Certainly.
Like one of my bigger things was this summer, I really needed the weather to stay cool.
Mhm.
It has been unusually rainy. My region, for the first time ever since I moved here, kind of outright flooded. I was so happy with it. The only promises that I made was that I'm not going to disclose what spirit it was, nor what I
Fair
did.
enough.
So, and the whole summer it was completely hush hush. But by the time like September hit and we had like our first actual heat wave, I was like, yes, I did something. It worked.
That's awesome. That's always such a great feeling to know that there is some, I don't want to say validation, but there's just that experience of effectiveness. I don't know how else to call it.
Spiritual validation through signs or your workings actually working is a very well validating experience. It's not something that you would obviously always chase,
Sure.
but it's something that brings you happiness when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a thorn among the roses of the practice sometimes. So what are some of your least favorite types of workings? If you
um,
if you if you have any?
I'm gonna say ceremonial magic, especially ceremonial magic that involve Christianity as their basis. That is the basis of a lot of Western esoteric tradition,
It
and
is.
it tends to involve quite extreme practices as well, such as like fasting and the way that you dress and the way that you act for months in advance.
Mhm.
And I have no doubt that it works for people, but here is me. I have short memory. I am fairly selective about my spirits. And there is no way that I'm going to be doing 5 pages of prayers in front of all of the instruments before I perform my work. It's not something that comes to me naturally. So I had to
Mhm.
put that down and go, that's probably not for me. It's probably for someone else, but that's probably not for me.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I sort of I like some of the aspects of ceremonial magic, but like you said, some of it can be a little bit excessive, and there's a lot of trappings to it. So I just sort of I take what I like, and then I just sort of leave the rest.
There are
Mhm.
quite a lot of people that come to left hand path in particular, and they have a lot of religious trauma. And I, I wanna when I'm talking to other people, I will always tell them to not vilify things like ceremonial magic and Western esoteric traditions. Um, to not really see this as, people are using other spirits to control spirits. That's not a very healthy attitude to take to the whole thing. I have good friends that do use very ceremonial magic methods. Um, they're people just like you and me, and it is something that some people do need to get over their religious trauma, but just as a method, it's really not for me.
Right, right. I will say that I noticed a significant change in the way the spirits interacted with me, especially goetic spirits, when I addressed them more as like coworkers or partners, as opposed to like, I don't know, like an animal to be poked and prodded and caged. So I
um,
can definitely agree with that. Go ahead.
I address them probably as you would a wise elder. So
Sure.
like
Yes.
you come in into a room and you can imagine like a, I don't know, a 70-year-old man, and you go, hey, I would like to hear from you because you're an expert on this. I
Hmm.
have this situation, Could you
Yeah.
help? It tends to work out for me fairly well.
I love that approach. And I've actually listened to some of your stories about, I don't know if they were invocations or evocations, but certainly communications that you had, like Alokis, and I forget who the other one was that I watched, but I very much got that air of, I don't know if reverence is the word, but definitely respect. And I appreciate that because I don't see that as often as I would like to.
Those all YouTube short things, I have quite a few of them pre-recorded. I just upload them when I have nothing else to upload.
Hmm.
Um, because that comes from the Monolithers handbook, because I did invocations for it, and I did invocations on all Goetic and Ducante spirits. So I think
Okay.
there's 101, and that has been a 5 or 6 month long project, and I'm fairly glad that I did it.
Okay, and what makes you say that?
It was quite the experience. If I wasn't writing the book, I would have never had the reason to
Sure.
try and invoke over 100 spirits. And with some of them, it also improved my ability to differentiate of what is me and what is not me. Because there's a
Well,
couple of spirits, not a lot, but a couple that I'm pretty sure are more thought forms than actual beings, because
yeah.
the Ducante hierarchy is a bit let's just say not entirely historically grounded. So there has been crickets on a few of
Mhm.
those lines, no matter what I tried doing, but there were just been crickets. And with some spirits, the experience have been less than pleasant.
Mhm.
There are definitely spirits that spooked me. The
Mhm.
biggest spook has been by far Dandelion, that just made me react of, oh, I touched the stove, let me just reel all the way back and never touch that ever again.
Wow. Okay. I've heard that about Dantalion before. For me, it was Glaciolabalus that was like that. I felt like I was in an ocean and there was something beneath me that wanted to swallow me the whole time, but it wasn't because I was entertaining. I was like a toy for it or something.
It's I had spirits that were very destructive and whose energy field was just very let's just say it makes you wanna get out, but they weren't like malicious. Like Abaddon. Abaddon felt to me like a black hole that it just has a constant pull to it, which is
Mhm.
whoa. But with that line, the horror in it was that the spirit demonstrated to me what it can do, and that completely messed with my emotions in like the span of a couple of minutes. And
Wow.
it went from, oh, this is a very nice spirit, to like this complete abject horror, and they literally think that the spirit was simply showing off. Like,
Interesting.
hey,
They do that.
this is what I can, this is my actual range of things that I can cause and that I can do, which made me look at him like a psychologist psychopath, but
That's
that
that's
is
funny.
that is a very humanizing layer to a spirit. It's not necessarily a malicious kind of thing, but it's just experience that really stuck to my brain just because of
Mhm.
how potent it was.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, Abaddon was very similar, except for me it was less like a black hole and more like a circulating saw blade. Like like trying to sit on a circulating, like reciprocating saw. But you know, we don't get into this because we don't like a little bit of chaos. So I love what you mentioned about defining what is you and what isn't you. And
I'm I'm
yeah,
sorry, give me a second. There is a cat in my room because my husband opened the door and he's crying. So I'll just let him out really fast.
no worries.
It's because I said to my husband that I'm gonna have a talk, and he came in and said hi, then went, oops, I forgot. And the cat ran in and started going,
he,
meh.
he can join in on the conversation if he wants to.
Nah, he's an atheist. He's not super into this whole thing.
That's okay. So yeah, you were mentioning how doing these communications help to define the line of where you begin and where you end, or what is you and what isn't you. And I think that's extremely profound.
Because sometimes you just get crickets. So you can't, you know that if you're getting nothing, that you're definitely not imagining it. In
Hmm.
other cases when you are getting something, and you definitely know that you're not imagining it when you actually do a working and it works. So
Yeah, that was the first time it ever quote unquote worked for me. I took some time off for like a week because I was like, I need to integrate this and ground from that experience. So when you mention path working, um, what does that mean for you, just at a very vague, superficial level? Does that involve visualizations? Does it involve like lighting candles? Like, how do you get in the mood for
uh,
path working?
for me, path working involves recreating a scene in your head step by step and
Excellent.
using that to connect with
Mhm.
the spirit. I have tried ends and sigils before, and they similarly work for me, but path working ended up my being to go method because it's the easiest way
Okay.
for me. But it's not like superior or inferior to the others, it's just the one that's easier for me.
Sure. Yeah, I that's interesting because I will use a sigil or glyph and a mantra or N to sort of conjure the scenario. And then once I'm there, I'm just like, okay, here I am. Like, who wants to talk? Who's here? What's going on?
Oh, I can just take a scenario that's supposed to be there and then go
Mhm.
line by line, put myself there, and I am there.
Uh-huh.
Or, of course, you can just use a sigil or an M to achieve the exact same goal. What I found is that a lot of people are looking for tools, but the most important thing is meditation, intent. So know where
Hmm.
you're trying to go, know what kind of spirit you're trying to hook up upon. And as long as you know who you're trying to ring, you
Yes.
can get there through such a variety of methods. You can just have a name and a vague description of what you're expecting, and if you intently call enough, you're probably gonna get an answer.
Yeah, I've certainly found that to be true. Yeah, I love what you said about like knowing what to expect, like knowing what to expect on the other end of the line so that you have an idea of whether that or not that's them and how accurate your working is.
It's one of the issues that I have with the conglomeration that is Satan. as an entity
Okay.
because technically it's just a title that means the opposer. So
Sure.
some
Or
people
advocate. Yeah. Mhm.
go, I want to contact Satan. And it's like, okay, do you know which Satan? Like, do you have an idea of what this spirit is supposed to be like? And maybe even, you know what, just pull a Bible off your shelf and find like a specific verse and go, I am targeting the specific Satan that is mentioned in this verse in particular, because there is nothing to say that all of the Satans are one thing and rather just a whole bunch of different beings that got labeled the opposer.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I think people sort of we get lost in meta gods a lot of the time, and I think that's an important distinction to make. That yeah. So when you mention like Satan, so where in your mind is there any relationship between Lucifer, Satan, and the devil, or is that just sort of I guess how do you feel about that?
No and yes. What a wonderful answer. But uh, Lucifer is very distinct from Satan because the only Lucifer that we really have is a Roman version of Greek Phosphorus,
Hmm.
and that is a minor deity in that system. You know, Lucifer, the son of Aurora, that sort of thing. But at some point, the capitalization in the Bible happened. And when it
Yeah.
happened, it became a name. And because it became a name, it became another venue that people use to contact the one spirit that we really have registered as Lucifer, but it does muddy the waters. So, yes and no, but interestingly enough, people that even have their own misconceptions of Lucifer and are contacting them as the Christian devil somehow really ring an entity that in all experiences seems to be very similar one to
Hmm.
another. They're like,
Hmm.
oh, it was a very peaceful presence, or oh, it's a presence that, I just wanted to do sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but really kind of pulled me out of that and directed me very gently towards maybe better pursuits as to where my life should go. And a spirit that asked of me to take care of myself more and be healthy and helped me with my anxiety. And it literally does sound a lot more like what Phosphorus slash
Uh-huh.
Roman Lucifer should
Uh-huh.
be, less than what a Christian devil should be. But with the other side of the Satan devil thing, um, that's even harder because they're kind of synonymous, kind of not. Both are titles more than
Right.
anything. Demons at one point were called devils. So
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
devil with the capital D would just be top demon. But
Yeah, yeah.
but in a way, both are just descriptors more than they are spirits. So if you want to go, I want to make a deal with the devil. Okay, boy, well, what do you mean by the devil? Which
Mhm. And
one?
what do you mean by a deal?
Yeah. What is on your mind? How are you
Mhm.
approaching this? Because with just that line, you're probably approaching it wrong.
Mhm.
It's the same when people want to contact Satan. You really need to know which one. And it gets
Mhm.
even worse when you take as Connolly's considerations into the equation, where she's like, Satan is the all. And it's like, that kind of sounds like the definition of God, but with a different name. So if it's
Yeah.
the demonic all, okay, that's not something that you conceptualize. So even in the spiritualities where the all is a thing and exists, you still use separate deity figures
Mhm.
as a way to better conceptualize whom you're calling. As calling the all is a bit like, well, okay, did you want the Titanic, the iceberg, your table, the coffee? What are you trying
It
to?
raises more questions than it answers. Yeah.
Yes. So those two, Satan and the devil, I would say, are complex.
Uh-huh.
spirits because it depends on your understanding and your definition and what are you trying to achieve with it. Well, Lucifer to me is like totally to the side, like
Sure.
completely different thing.
Okay. So I guess I will spill the beans a little bit on my end. The way that I currently look at it is like Satan is sort of a link between the devil and Lucifer. And the reason that I say that is from like a societal perspective, because the adversary a lot of times is too challenging for some people. And they're like, oh, it's ruining my life. This is a devil. But for others, the adversary can be, and adversity can be very enlightening, which is like the realm of Lucifer. So for me, like Hasatan is sort of like almost a link between Lucifer and the devil. And it's like a gradient system almost. It's hard to explain.
The beauty of left-hand paths is that everyone's faith is individual and nobody needs to be correct. So
Exactly.
I can see that as a gradient of like Lucifer's the light one and the devil's the black one and Satan's
Mhm.
somewhere in the middle with
Yeah,
the
but I still don't think of them necessarily as like entities per se, though, because like you said, their titles. Hasatan is like the accuser or the adversary, and Lucifer is like the light bearer. Well, like Prometheus was a light bearer, you know.
how
So,
many times did Jesus actually actually that's another funny bit that Jesus did describe himself as a light bearer several times
uh-huh,
in the Bible, so it's like when you're calling Lucifer, you should also be kind of specific, probably. I
probably
normally
so.
specify it as Greek phosphorus, Roman
Mhm.
Lucifer, because that kind of puts the concept cap on.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's similar to the idea of correspondences. Like you're sort of putting more coordinates and you're like really defining that energy. Like you're narrowing it down, basically. I like that. So where do you draw inspiration from when it comes to spirituality? It's kind of a weird question. I guess what are some of your influences, I guess, is a better question.
It's a very weird question. Um, as a theistic Luciferian, I'm gonna say that, well, Lucifer,
Mhm,
because the way that my own personal spiritual practice works is you know how some people go, I have sold myself to the devil. Well, I would say I have gone through um let's not put it in such a harsh and edgy way. Let's just say I have gone through several rites of initiation where I said that I do honestly really do dedicate myself to you,
mhm,
though through several months and with more words. So with that, I had took on some things that I promised to do upon myself, one of which is a daily practice
mhm,
in some way or another. And with daily practice, when you practice every single day, you do end up having a bit of a back and forth. So, what happens is that your practice becomes directly influenced by your practice, which
mhm,
is a very weird descriptor to do. But because of my back and forth, it's effectively not me sailing the boat, but more of an us sailing the boat together when the boat is still kind of my life. So it's the way that I decide what I'm gonna engage on and what I will further explore or what I'm gonna do is directly influenced of I asked the spirit or I ran some suggestions through the spirit and they also thought that some things would be a good idea and some things wouldn't be a good idea. So
uh-huh,
for example, of things that it's a bit of a power and control thing. And for some people, that would be a very much power imbalance because they would be like, how can you take so much um, influence on what is your life? But for me, the coexistence is kind of a natural thing. But
mhm,
for example, on the stricter side of things, uh, one thing that I'm currently doing is writing a book on tarot because it also helps me to explore tarot further. So that was considered
mhm,
a good idea, and that was the thing that I came together as a decision with the spirit. And one things that I could never do would be to explore the opposite of the tree of life, the Klipoth, and it's hard to pronounce because it was simply marked as not for you. These kind of challenges and these kind of trials, sure, some people are very into it, and sure, it brings them enlightenment, but it's really not for you. You would be someone that would probably be too broken down by it, so cannot endorse. So I take
Interesting.
my practice from my practice effectively, which is a very circular sort of reasoning, but it works.
I think that, I mean, there's a fractal nature to existence in general anyway, and as above, so below, etc. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, and I don't even see that anywhere near stagnation, because like you never go home again. You can't step in the same river twice. Like every time you revisit it, it's like you're completing the circle at another octave. So it's like you're spiraling up or down, whichever way you look at it. But yeah, I think it's so important to revisit your fundamentals regularly and re-examine them to make sure that the structure is steady.
And then, of course, you can always see what other people around you sort of do. Because once again, I moderate demonolatry practices. That's the bigger subreddits for demons. I also own our demons, but that one's a bit more like it's a weird one because most people that kind of come to our demons are people that either have mental problems or Christians. And they're
Yeah, I
going,
noticed that.
help me, my TV wouldn't stay on. Is this a demonic attack? And you're like, that is
Uh,
that is an electrical fault. Investigate the mundane over magical first. But
yes, great advice.
because I run in those communities daily as I'm moderating them, you obviously get a bit of influences from other people, but there's no such like one person that I go, oh, I am sculpting my practice according to them, or there's no like obvious influence of I love these writers. No, it's kind
Mhm.
of thing that I build myself through my practice, so I build my practice through my practice. I
Yeah,
just that's
I,
that circles.
I'm very similar. The first like 15 out of the almost 20 years of practice, I wasn't even really into the occult. Like I kind of was, but I really wasn't. And then once I actually started reading other people, it's like, oh yeah, like I agree with that. I've thought of that before. So it's hard to really cite any major influences other than just life and experience. Yeah.
It's
So
kind of like when people come in and they ask these questions of, so how did demons change your life for you? And then you're like,
oh boy.
I've been living with this for a very long time now. So by the end, it just becomes life is influencing my life back. Where do I draw the line?
Yeah. Yeah. And the whole that is such a common question. How did the demons do it for you? It's like they don't. That's more of an angelic thing. Like the demons, like somebody once said to me in one of these conversations, like they give you the map, but you still have to do the walking. Yeah.
Um, it even becomes worse because because I practice with Lucifer, and he's plenty gentle, but what happens if you start doing shadow work without meaning to do shadow work? So you sit down for just a regular meditative session, and suddenly it becomes a freaking psychiatrist examination. And like it becomes of tell me more about this fear that you have. And by the end, you're just like a crying mess. And
Just
you're
a
like,
puddle of tears. Yeah.
yeah, and I wasn't intending to take a look inside myself. Thanks, that was unexpected, but that sort of is a thing that happens. Like you can get opportunities of demons, especially if you can't get them normally. But there's still a lot of walking into where you become that person that can then stand up to those opportunities and do something with them moving
Yes,
forward.
absolutely. So whenever you whenever you reflect on your practice, what are some difficulties that you've had along the way, other than, you know, spontaneous shadow work or encountering mentally unstable people in the subreddits? What are some difficulties that you've noticed?
Ah, there would be a very large amount of things because
Because you're
it's
human.
life. Yeah, because it's life. You're human. Um, Faith struggles. It's funny, even if your faith is confirmed, you
Mhm.
will encounter points where you're struggling and just keeping faith, in which case you will start questioning your own sanity of,
Exactly.
hey, me doing all of this mumbo jumbo, is it really sane? So it gets to a point where people, go like, how do you absolutely know? And how do you absolutely know that you're not deluding yourself? Well, nobody absolutely knows. You just have to come to a point where you accept that you may be, but maybe it's for the best anyway. So
I love that.
you fall into that and overthinking, over
Mhm.
philosophizing, knowing just how much you can humanize a spirit to a point where you are gonna flip flop a point between it is completely like me to it is completely alien to me, and how do I interpret and interact with it? The need for interpretation and not taking things at face value is
Exactly.
another thing, because a lot of dreams or visions, they don't literally mean what you see. If you have a repeating dream that your grandma is dying, it's less of, oh my God, demons are coming after my grandma, and more, hey, this is a fear. You should face it. Your grandma will die one day. What is your connection between life and death? Where do you stand? How do you feel about it? Maybe, sit down and think about it. And I'm gonna go back to overthinking
Mhm.
because I do that a lot, to a
I do
point
too.
where, how a lot of people go, what is the meaning of my life? What is the point of my life? And Lucifer at one point put it to me going, think of it this way, you are here to have fun.
Mm.
Your writing, your work, your family life, all that you do that to give yourself some sort of illusion of meaning, something to do, something to improve through, something to experience. But ultimately, you are here to enjoy.
Mm.
So stop overthinking, enjoy
Yeah.
your walks in nature, enjoy the pictures that you take, enjoy the moments you spend patting your cat. Like, don't fall
Right.
into that I must be productive mentality, or I am a robot, somebody must have left me an instruction that I must fulfill or else. Like,
Right.
there is no such thing as you must fulfill or else. There is a journey that you are onto, and your only goal should be to enjoy that journey, because it's going to continue going anyway.
Yeah, so I probably would agree with almost all of that, if not all of it. It seems to be more about the experience than your analysis of the experience, and just
Yeah.
being engaged in ways that feel meaningful to you. It's, yeah, I think people, I myself am guilty of just being over analytical, and I just had to learn how to turn off my mind. That's one reason why meditation is so beneficial, I think, is because if you can actually learn to turn off your mind, you might hear somebody else speak for once, like internally. Yeah.
That's another thing. It's why I don't really plan the future. I used to super plan the future, and then I fell into some sort of a gap where I'm like, I'm either living or dying, and I don't know which one of it is. So there's something that's stuck in my mind that goes, the future is not guaranteed. So instead, it's permanently a present.
Mhm.
And the truth is that I could be 70. Like I could go to a ripe old age, and my whole journey, I would have been in permanently the present. And that is not a bad thing.
I agree. I agree. So often we get anxious by living in the future or depressed by living in the past. And people go 30 years and realize that they weren't even alive because they were somewhere else in their life. And
Uh,
that's a shame, I think.
It's like suddenly all those goals of I must be there in 10 years or I must do this, suddenly all of that just disappeared and it became of I am here now. I'm writing this book now.
Mhm.
Later will be later. I don't know what comes later. I am enjoying this moment right now. You know, I'm having conversation with my husband right now, or I'm patting a
Mhm.
cat right now, or today I will go for a walk, you know, or today I will connect with my spirits. And sure, there's, you know, life things that you have to take care of.
Right.
There's bills. You can't just shunt that off the window and pretend that it doesn't exist. But it's a lot less, it's living as if the only way that I can describe is it's living as if you're already dying,
Mhm.
but
Wow.
at the same time not being depressed about it because you're like, my tomorrow could not be, and that
Right.
is okay because it's permanently the present.
Mhm. Yeah,
But also
absolutely.
tomorrow may very well be, and you could just be permanently the present for 50 years, and you know maybe I would be mentally more stable in those 50 years if I did take a look that it's permanently the present.
Yeah, I've found that it's almost like you have a better idea of your future the more engaged with the present you are because you're more grounded. Hmm.
Short-term future, sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, what are some weaknesses? I know you've mentioned like short memory. I have a extremely short memory as well, and that's so frustrating. And that's one reason why I had to just give up the whole intellectual pursuit of analysis because I couldn't hold all of that information. There was just no way. So anyway, I digress. What are some of your weaknesses when it comes to practice?
um I have a lot of weaknesses as a person, as a human being in general,
That's okay.
because I have a lot of, well, for one thing, physical issues, and the whole memory thing. I had a surgery, several
Mhm.
surgeries for my back because I
Interesting.
had scoliosis. And in one of them, there is a chance that I flatlined, but the doctors didn't quite say as such. Instead, they told my family she lost a lot of blood. And when I woke up and they asked me, can you say your name and what time it is? And I did, the whole room looked relieved. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if I died on the table or something, but the information that they asked was very simplistic and present, and they didn't bother to dig deeper because I knew who I was. I knew in theory who my parents were, like what their faces were, what their names were, but just the day-to-day lives, just like, oh, celebrations, your birthdays, like going out, I don't know, on a family vacation, all of those memories gone. And
Wow.
I think I struggled to create them to begin with. So,
Interesting.
yeah, so my whole practice, I don't hold memories very well, but somehow I managed to navigate life just fine without them. Like, I even had a programming degree, but one thing that they don't push you into after high school is memorization. So it's fine. You have books. If you have logical thinking, you can think things out. But so I can't do super long proclamations that I will write down because I will never remember it. I can read it, or I can just say what things that are in my heart. So that comes out a lot better for me. And funnily enough, during this work, one of the shadow work moments was that I got some of the memories that were gone from my childhood. And that was very surprising and
That's
very
interesting.
emotional. Very, very emotional because I never expected to have them ever again. And first they came back as feelings, as remembering of standing on hot stones, for example, when you're in the beach and the beach isn't sand, but it's stones. And later on, I got bits and bobs here and there. And some of the things that came back also kind of framed at least one of my caregivers when I was growing up in a very not nice light.
Uh-huh.
So those memories probably came back for a reason because later on I confronted them about it. And not only did they not defend themselves about it, they then blamed me for remembering the bad things. But, uh,
That's atrocious.
yeah, that person has been cut off from my life because later on I was like, oh yeah, and when I hit adulthood, they were still quite the dick to me, but because they're a relative, I always ignored it.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, that's very common.
so memory is very much one of the things. Accepting my own limitations was another thing. Sometimes I will have you plan, and God laughs. Like the saying goes, sometimes I will have migraine weeks. Sometimes I will have bad health weeks.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I will not be able to establish connection almost at all. Fine, prayer works too. Just trust that you're being heard.
Sure.
It's fine. You don't need to look a specific way for the spirit. You can call them from your sick bed. It's fine.
Oh
They
yeah,
don't care.
absolutely.
especially if you need that spiritual support. From more spiritual side of things as well, because I overthink things and because I shunt spirits from being completely alien to me to being completely alike me, um, conceptualizing a relationship also becomes a weakness, not a strength, because you're having a quote unquote relationship, if you can describe it that way, with a thing that is very much not a physical human being that is there. It's some practitioners will call spirits their parents. They will go, "Oh, Mother Lilith,
Yeah,
oh,
that's the one I was gonna
Father,
cite.
oh,
Uh-huh.
Father Satan." Then we fall into a ground of God spousing, which I would technically assign myself to, and at the same time distance myself from this word because it is a relationship that is hard to conceptualize.
Hmm.
I feel familiar enough that
Hmm.
I can sit down and I can open to my patron with the word love. Oh, love, hello, love. The kind of almost English slang, but at the same time, it is not the same as having an actual physical relation.
Right.
And at the same time, you have to always check in with yourself of, am I over humanizing a spirit and am I falling into a personal delusion?
Uh-huh.
Or is what I'm interpreting is what I'm interpreting? So my practice has a lot of second guessing
Uh-huh.
in
As
it,
it
I
should,
would
I
say.
think.
Um, so that keeping yourself grounded, I think I'm fairly grounded, but just second guessing the whole spiritual communication, trying to conceptualize it as a relationship.
Mhm.
And of course, memory issues would be most of my issues with my practice. That and probably trying to conceptualize the how much power does a spirit actually have over me and what does a connection mean. That's the things that I spend quite a lot of times going backwards and forwards, and always I am told that I am overthinking because
I
I
think
am.
those are important questions to ask, if maybe not all the time, but every once in a while. Like, how much power can the spirit have over me, and how much should I let it have over me? And you raise an interesting point about where we begin and they end. Currently, my current perspective is something like they exist within me, but they exist within me because there was the principle of them beforehand. So it's like I see like a demon or a spirit's like foot inside my brain, and then like extending out to the cosmos is like one way that I sort of conceptualize it. It's very strange, I understand, but to some people, maybe not to you.
If I had to explain myself as a tree, well, that's already an interesting premise. Imagine that you have like the core,
Mhm.
and the core is you, and
Mhm.
what is around you, I would say, is not necessarily me. Um, I would say that the outer layer is very much influenced by my spirit, but the very skin of it would also be influenced by the people around you and your community and your family and
Yeah.
your friends and your connections in real life. But effectively, so I would see myself as there's definitely a core that's me, but there's also definitely a part that's influenced by, on a more superficial level, people, and on a deeper level, my patron. So,
So like maybe nature versus nurture or something related to that a little bit. It's interesting to me that you mentioned multiple surgeries and memory issues and also not being afraid to call to the spirits from a point of despair or weakness. That resonates with me so deeply because I spent so much time in and out of the hospital and I think I had like 6 surgeries over the course of a year that I had to be anesthetized and put under for. And ever since then, I have had memory issues. And I've looked into it. Apparently, there's something called post-operative cognitive dysfunction that relates to too much anesthesia. So it's interesting that you bring that up. I can definitely relate to that. And the other thing is, one of the things in the hospital bed that happened was I stopped paging the doctors and I started paging the spirits. And next thing I know, I'm out of the hospital. It was like an expected patronum moment where like I wasn't waiting for somebody else anymore. I realized, oh, this whole time I've been waiting on me.
like people from right hand path religions, from like more acceptable, bigger religions, in times of need, they will put their faith on the higher divine. They will
Mhm.
pray to them, they will pray for their loved ones, they will find strength in it. There's no reason why you can't do the same on a left hand path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or look at yourself as, the god of your own um perspective, and to call forth that power from within.
It would be a very, very interesting experiment if somebody went, oh, of course, not wishing it, but if something super bad happened and someone actually tried to connect with their higher selves for support and guidance.
That may have been what happened with me. I really I don't know. To this day, I still look and wonder of how did I get out of that hospital bed because it baffles me. And it's also interesting that you bring up near death experience. So many practitioners that I speak with, near death experience is brought up like 50% of the time.
But
And
you
I
see,
think
I
that's
can't
interesting.
even define it as a near death experience because no doctor, when you died on the table, they were just like,
Sure.
oh, you still have your memory. Good. And it's like, what happened? And they had a lot of blood as well. They had like to do almost 10 liters worth in the surgery, but it was like 12-hour surgery because
Wow.
it's the whole back. It was more than a human's worth of blood,
Yeah, like
but
4 to 6 liters is normally like what a human
yeah.
has.
So like the literal wording was she lost a lot of blood, and the super relief that I had my cognitive function. So I have no idea what that means. Like,
Yeah,
did
I
I
you
flatline at
don't
any point? I don't know.
it's crazy. You don't seem like you can hold 10 liters of blood. It's hard to tell from where you're sitting, but you'd have to be a relatively large person to hold that much blood. So I can imagine that you probably got a transfusion and then lost it, and then got a
Yeah.
transfusion and then lost it.
It's like something must have happened that caused them to be very panicked during that surgery, but it's fine because I am very obviously alive.
Yeah, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
So, how important are materials to you in your practice?
A little bit, but not a lot. Um, I kind of, I right now I'm staring at my Yankee candle just going on my altar.
I've
But
got the kid.
I like aromatherapy. I like candles, dedicating things like that to my spirits at the same time. Kind of, I don't know, just help me with vibes in my room, my
Uh-huh.
emotional well-being. But
Right.
it's not like, ah, I don't have my altar, I don't have my sigils, I don't have my candle, what do? All of those are like completely optional. I could literally raise everything that I have on my altar and just
Good.
set up a completely new one, because the connection is between, for me, it is spiritual. It's between
Right.
you and it is the divine. And an object's just an object. But at the same time, I do kind of enjoy having the
I
object.
do too.
Yes.
Yeah. It's they're very symbolic. Like right now I have a candle going with a major deity that I work with, and at the very least it helps me keep them in mind and the way that they have suggested that I function. And if it is emanating some magical influence, so be it. But it's also about just keeping the rhythm of that in my life.
It gives you something spiritual to do and a
Yeah, true.
reason to remember
And
the
it brings
spirit.
it down to the
Yeah,
physical plane too. Yeah.
because now you have a connective point.
Yeah, and that's grounding, which I think is good. So, what are some things to avoid? We've sort of skirted around this a little bit. You've mentioned like not taking things at face value, and you've mentioned like making sure that you have some form of expectation before you go into the working. Is there anything else off the top of your head that you could think to avoid as a practitioner?
Let's say, know whom you're trying to contact.
Sure.
Don't become that meme where a guy is like holding his hand up to a butterfly and he goes, "Is that a sign?"
Okay.
Because there's a lot of people that go, "I meditated, nothing happened." But then every single little pebble from that point on, they're gonna go, "Is that a sign? Is that a sign? Is that?" If it is a sign, you're gonna recognize it. it's
Right.
it's gonna just hammer you over the head. It's gonna become very repetitive if you can't tell.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
Obsessive
absolutely,
even.
yeah,
Mhm.
very absolutely collide into you. um Working with spirits, especially left-hand path spirits, you have to expect it will dredge some shit up. Like, a lot of people come in and go, okay, what I really want to happen is that Samantha loves me. And I'm gonna now contact that goetic demon and I'm gonna tell them, Samantha loves me. Samantha must love me. And then
Uh-huh.
their life really, really collapses because they're not the kind of person that Samantha can love. They have
Aha.
to build up their internal qualities and
Yes.
become the kind of person that Samantha could connect and relate to. But they reach the point of unstable foundations are toppling down, and they go, oh, demons are evil, and just
Exactly.
start running, sprinting in the opposite direction immediately. So, no matter what kind of working you're gonna doing, whatever you're gonna be trying to achieve, you have to be the kind of person that has to be able to use that opportunity. It's not going to fall from the sky, which means that a lot of it will be working on yourself, and that working on yourself can be very painful. There are people that literally started reliving their most traumatizing events in their sleeps. Like, they started having repeated nightmares. All sorts of experiences can happen. You go, I want a better job. You get fired from your current one, but that action will push you into finding a job that actually is better for you because, well, you wanted a better job. So
Mhm.
something has to push you into getting a better job. So you have to expect some sort of collapse, and you have to expect that memories from the past can come back, and that you will have to face yourself, and you have to face your shadow, and you will have to improve yourself, and you will have to go and seek and be brave. You can't just hope that what you want will fall from the sky. That's not how it's going to happen. Another one is to be grounded. especially when connection becomes a bit more, I'm gonna say complicated, because you hear the word God spousing quite a lot, especially on TikTok, especially by 15-year-old girls, where what is love to a spiritual being would be a question that you would need to sit down and philosophically ponder in order for you to be even able to define your connection in some sort of human word. And I know one user, even Pen on Reddit, they described love as an all-encompassing witnessing, where
Interesting.
you don't try to change the person that you're observing.
Mhm.
You are just lost in the emotion of the observance.
And
So,
acceptance. Mhm.
an acceptance, it becomes the kind of, it's hard to even explain because some spiritual experiences can feel very sexual, some spiritual experiences can feel very loving. It's the kind of thing that people experience when they go, God loves me. And it's very easy to have that kind of experience and to jump off the deep end and run off to some sort of delusion, because I know quite a few people that will be like, I consider myself to be God spoused, and then they will go on some sort of daydreaming vision quest, and they will
Mhm.
proclaim to be the queen of hell, that they will obviously have seen it for their very eyes. They seen it in a vision, and it was definitely red, and they definitely had subjects, and it becomes some sort of weird cult of personality or some sort of narrative that's probably fun to experience because our brains want adventure, but it's not very grounded in reality. It's the same way that people that yearn for war. It's
Uh-huh.
the exact same thing where people go, my deity is fighting another deity, or I am a soldier of God and I am there to kill demons. How do I know that? I've seen it in a vision. Well, that's your brain running off with spirituality. So keeping grounded, not interpreting what you see as a literal thing that is happening,
Mhm.
is so incredibly important. And
Mhm.
it does raise very difficult questions of what did I see? How does that relate? What kind of commentary is it giving me on the life that I'm currently leading? You know, what I saw, is it an approximation of what I can understand from the perspective, like if you ask a question of what is afterlife and you see a beautiful place, is that afterlife, or is that the approximation of your brain and how it interprets the message when the message could have been like, it's nice. No.
Exactly. It's peaceful. Yeah, it doesn't mean
Yeah,
that there's tulips and daisies there. You
yeah.
just like tulips and daisies.
So that the amount of questions that you need to ask what you're experiencing, why you're experiencing it, and how to interpret it, that is definitely going to enter any kind of serious practice. And I know that it's not for everyone, because some people, they separate themselves from this part. Like you can be a ceremonial magician that will mostly do things on a I need basis. So you will do your workings for when you need them, and your spiritual part of the practice will come from fasting, from worshiping God, from, um, not masturbating, things like that. That will be your spiritual part. But if you are more open to spiritual experiences, and especially because on the left hand path, there's nothing to tell you that
Mhm.
spiritual experience, and maybe you're floating off into la la land a little bit. You need to know how to ground yourself.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
that would probably be it.
Mm.
Well, perhaps do not interpret stove hot experiences as the stove being evil.
Right.
that's
Well said. Well said.
that's another good thing. Um, Some
Wow.
spirits will spook you. The way that you interact with their energy will spook you. That doesn't mean that the spirit is bad, and that doesn't mean that you should pass judgment. The stove is hot. You touch the hot stove. That doesn't mean that you should forsake the stove for forever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't agree with you more. So what else was I going to ask? Oh, you mentioned programming. So in your mind, I know very, very, very little about programming. Like I've used HTML like 5 times. So like, but I can't help but shake this feeling of about how similar psychology and programming are. I mean, the brain is like a terminal that you input and then there's an output. Is that something that you've explored or you've had an experience with?
I I understand the point of view, and you can apply that kind of thinking to even the universe and still stay sane. Like going, oh, the
Uh-huh.
universe is a computer program, and if I do this, this happens, or else this happens, or else this happens. You can use similar terminology for self-programming. You can create topos and thought forms if you wish, especially if you want to do just a small servitor that has a very, very specific set of programs. So, they're only supposed to do this and nothing else. But in general, I find it not too good for one's practice to fall into comparing programming to a human brain and to
Sure.
reality, because what people fall into is we're living in a prison matrix and you're all our NPCs. So
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
it becomes a viewpoint where you see yourself as sentient and nobody else is sentient,
Hmm.
or you start looking for glitches in reality and a way to escape. That's not grounded and that's
Yeah.
not useful. So it is a good philosophical pondering if one
Sure.
wants to ponder, but what I'm trying to caution, I guess, is don't fall into a conspiracy hellhole. That's nothing good ever happens in conspiracy hellholes.
I agree. I agree. And so much of my interpretation of things is that it's passing through my filter. When I have a vision, it's okay, something was trying to tell me in a language I understand as opposed to, oh, I went to hell and I met this entity or whatever. It's yeah, that's very good advice. Try and stay grounded and don't take things so extremely, because you'll tip the scale. So how is magic typically, or esoteric philosophy even, viewed in your area, generally speaking?
I don't know. It's the clearest. I'm not open about it. Like, my
But
husband
do other
obviously,
people talk about it at all, or
well, obviously not. My husband knows that I'm into woo-woo, but the thing about England, and it is very polite, and people are less likely to project their personalities onto you than I saw Americans do, because
aha,
Americans are very loud people.
oh
They
yeah,
will come in and they will proclaim their political standing and they will proclaim their religion. And they even are more likely to falling into that "are you with me, tell me that you're with me"
and if you're
rabbit
not
hole.
with me, you're against me. Yeah,
Yeah, where a lot of people in Europe will be more covert. They won't really express themselves as loudly. And I don't want to say everybody, because obviously everyone's different and there's plenty of different people, but when it comes to things like sex, what you do behind closed doors, religion, who you vote for, a lot less people tend to be very vocal about it.
mhm.
So you can have a Satanist in your area, you will have no idea. That's perfect with me.
And sorry, I was sorry to interrupt. I was just you sort of made me like have this, or helped me to have this realization of perhaps Americans are seeking identity so strongly. Like, hi, my name is John or whatever, and I'm a Republican Christian. It's like they're striving. It's like I don't even like I just met you, dude. Like, and it makes me wonder how much of that is because of how young America is. We haven't really forged much of an identity besides like cheeseburgers and handguns.
Cheeseburgers and handguns. Well, that is one heck of an identity, man. But I mean, it is a very unique place because a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds mix, and the challenges of how you mix that are probably very unique because everyone's very outspoken, everyone has their own group, and with that group that they fit into, there's going to be a lot of friction against other groups. There's a lot more verbal dislike for other people. There's a lot more actual like projected hatred or love. It's like it's a place of more intense emotions. And from the bigger picture, it would probably be a very interesting place to observe of a whole bunch of different people from different backgrounds, and they're in this one spot and they're trying their damnedest to find a way to coexist and to secure their identity. Well, it's a lot less prominent in other places. There are still groups that will have very obvious identity, like before I moved, I moved around England, but I'm from Lithuania originally, even so.
Okay.
I've only been living here for 11 years. Not in this location. I've been living in this location for like 3 years, but in England in general for 11. There are streets that have very deep identity. Like my previous dentist in the previous place that I was in was Jewish. And
Mhm.
a lot of people that you will see that would come into that dentistry place would be very overtly, obviously Jewish because they were with their religious attire, and women would have a lot of children and they would have long skirts. But at no point does that ever come up in the conversation. Like I am
Right.
going and visiting a dentist, and the dentist greets me with a smile, and we can have a conversation about how our everyday life went. And obviously, I don't come in and proclaim I'm a Luciferian because that might just be interpreted as I want to eat your baby. But
Well, and it's irrelevant to the matter at hand.
yeah,
What does religion have to do with your teeth?
yeah,
It-
but
yeah.
it's completely irrelevant. But even if I came out and proclaimed, there is a chance that while I would shock that person and they will internally would think really badly about me, they
Mhm.
would try to politely, professionally not show it on. Like they would be like, "Oh, how interesting. So anyway, your teeth."
Right. Right.
So I don't know what kind of warmth this place has. Obviously, if I go into my town center, I do see people dressed in alternative fashion sometimes, but I never ask them their religion.
Sure.
I
Sure.
don't just approach people and ask what they put faith in. That just kind of sounds wrong. So I don't know. But when I was in my doctor recently here, because I had to go to my doctor and I am very socially awkward. And they asked me for occupation. And currently, I don't do anything outside of tarot reading and writing books. This wasn't
Yeah.
always so. I often have like extra gigs or jobs on the side, and I want to go by the label that's like the most highly esteemed. And it's hard for me to call myself a writer despite having like 3 books out because I don't make a month to month living out of it. And my brain goes, if it can't pay your bills for that whole month, it don't count, even though it does. It absolutely does. So I blurted out, "Oh, I'm a tarot reader." And they just went, "Oh, how exciting." But like there was like no negative comment about that. But I have something inside of me that goes, "Oh, this professional doctor will look down upon me, the
Right.
uneducated peasant from their perspective that's reading tarot cards." But that might be internalized, so I don't know. I don't
I totally get that. I do tarot reading as well, and I also do like consultations and tutorings on the side. And it's hard to explain that to like a fireman. It's like, what do you do? It's like, I'm a consultant. And they're like, for what? And I'm like, esoteric philosophy. And they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, do you really want to go there, dude? Like, we're digging to the center here, and you might not like what you find.
Yeah, do you want me to continue answering further? Because I don't think you do.
Yeah, exactly. No. So, what are some experiences that you can discuss about goetic or goetic spirits? How do you like some people like they draw the circle and they get the knives and they you've mentioned before you don't approach it that way. So without getting too deeply into it, what sort of experiences have you had and how do you go about your approach in those matters?
I go through a meditative approach. I prefer my path workings, but if I don't have a path working for the spirit on hand, and I haven't made my own one, and with some spirits, they kind of did it because, like, I'm using Theodore Rose's path working for Lucifer, but
Okay.
at one point, I just had a vision of like a field of black flowers with silver stems. And I was
Ooh.
all like, oh, this is so pretty. And I just continued to hold that image in my head. And suddenly I felt that energy. And I was like, oh wait, that is also a connective path working. Duh.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be my own path working. But if I don't have it for a spirit, I find that ends and sigils work
Mhm.
just as well for me. With a sigil, if I am using a sigil, I'm not gazing in a sigil, I'm trying to recreate the sigil in my mind. And
Right.
it's it kind of before all of that, before I got into demonology, I had some basics of energy work because I briefly was in Michelle Belanger's psychic vampire community because that was helpful at that point in my practice.
Uh-huh.
And the way that I would connect with anyone's energy is that I noticed that for me, it is not like visual, but it helps if I almost like imagine like I have astral hands and I reach for it. So if I
I
am
like that. I like that.
if I am meditating on a sigil and I'm trying to connect through the sigil, it is almost like I have hands in my mind that are trying to reach into and almost through. That
Yes.
is that is how I would use a sigil with, and you just repeat it until it becomes a mantra and I start feeling something. I know that in the invocations are supposed to be very in, and evocations are supposed to be very out, but for me things do mix sometimes. So invocations in, I will normally feel, I will know that connection has worked if I almost like, hard to explain, but if I feel an energy in my field around me. So I
Sure.
would be like, oh, in front of me has suddenly become warm,
Uh-huh.
hello, or there will be a weight to it,
Yes.
or sometimes like my hairs will stand, some sort of physical reaction happens, so it's not just in. And with one of the invocations that I was doing, it was very funny because I have this circular lamp here. It's
Uh-huh.
not very illuminating on this camera, but it's just a circle light like you do for a streaming setup.
Mhm.
And I forget the name because hello, bad memory, but it was the spirit that's described as, I think, an old man riding a crocodile. And legitimately, I don't know why I can remember the description, but not the name.
So is
And
it Agares or Vasago?
um,
Agares is sometimes described as a person riding a elephant.
probably one of them. Great memory here.
Yeah.
No. Um, when that spirit came in, I was sitting in my corner doing my regular meditation. The lights were off. This light started flashing. and it turned
Interesting.
on, and I was like, I prefer it off, and it switched off, and I was like, okay, well, hello there.
Interesting. Interesting.
So something very physical can very much happen in my field. Then I will start having conversation, and the answers that I get is through brain thoughts, which some people are like, how do you know that you're not answering yourself? Well, in things that brain thoughts tell me normally, because I don't tend to have premonitions for what's gonna happen, but also brain thoughts tend to interpret themselves in funny voices sometimes, so that's fun, but not like audible voices. Just imagine if you were actually like reading a book and you were trying to give a character a voice that didn't just like sound like your own internal voice.
Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So normally I will just sit down and start having the conversation. Though I introduce myself, I will give my a reason for being there, like, hi. I When I was writing a book, it was like, I am writing a book about all of the Goetia Ducante hierarchy spirits, and I'm adding my experiences with them, which includes you, which is why I am here. Is it okay if we just have a chat? But sometimes people are very, very scared to call on the spirits because they're like, I have no obvious reason to do so. I just want to say a hi. Is that okay? Yeah, just meditate and say hi. I am here to feel your energy and say hello. So, hello. That's perfectly fine. Sometimes that's the reason, but sometimes you're doing like an invocation and you're like, I have a specific goal in mind, and that is when you would be like,
Yeah.
okay, I want this and this to happen. Do you think you can help me with this? Or do you have like alternative suggestions for how I can go about this, or like what I can do in my life?
It's a great
So
question.
you can like ask for advice with the situation, or you can ask for like an outright help from the spirit, and then you can make that request as narrow or wide as you like. Whenever I'm making requests, I like to make them fairly wide. With the whole temperature thing, I was like, I really hate hot air. I just need heat waves to not happen. And
I understand.
they were all like, can't fix global warming, sorry. But I was like, I
We can
just
bring you some
need
rain. Yeah.
I just need for it to be cool in my immediate area. And they were like, yeah, that can happen. And the whole place was just flooding for 3 months. And I was like, that's acceptable. Very much this place be flooding, then it'd be hot, you know. But it is that kind of sort of thing. So when I'm
Okay.
doing workings, I will, and sometimes I will also set a date of I need a thing to happen before this date.
Hmm.
And recently I was trying to help my husband get a job, and I set a date for an opportunity, and the date was a whole month. And I was working with Belial, and I swear he has a sense of humor because the opportunity came 10 minutes before the deadline. So,
Wow.
so like,
Wow.
he got a call that he has to interview 10 minutes before the allotted time, when allotted time was a whole month expired.
And he waited until 10 minutes prior.
Yeah, but obviously it happened, and I'm like, Spirit's toying with me.
That's a funny story. I don't get a lot of funny stories from like demonology practitioners and people who mess around with the more infernal. I don't necessarily love that term, but to me it relates to the underworld, and so I guess that's a good question. Um, when you think about like the goetic spirits versus like their like counterpart, do you get the feeling that like the goetic spirits are more like internal and like the counterparts are more external, or is that just me?
I think that's your personal viewpoint, because to me, I'm a bit more animist, so all is spirit. I'm trying
Sure,
not to
sure.
divine into like gods, demons, angels. I know that my fellow co-mod see gods as higher and demons as emanations of the god, like a wise spirit. And from philosophical point of view. And for them, any gods that are being interacted with are just that god's daemon or demon, rather than that god themselves. That
Right.
is their philosophical standing, because like in their philosophy, Hades would be impossible to almost physically comprehend for people, but Hades' daemon would be comprehensible because it's
Sure.
closer to human, it's closer to Earth, so it's like
Hmm.
that nice link. In
Yeah,
my philosophy, all is spirit. Like if you
I
want
agree
to
with that.
work with the spirit of the local tree, that is just
Right.
as meaningful as working with a goetic demon, but you would probably be petitioning them for different things. Like you wouldn't just go to a tree and going like, hey, so I need to break up somebody. Like the tree would be
Or
like,
my
well,
husband
how
needs
can
a
I
job.
help you with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I definitely have that perspective as well. Especially when I think about it from like a scientific like a physics perspective. Like I'm looking at this table that's standing still, but it's comprised of atoms and molecules and quarks and muons that are alive to a very large degree. So I definitely maybe I didn't represent the way that I feel about it accurately. Maybe I should consider more deeply how I feel about that. But yeah, I definitely agree. Everything is alive. Like if I bump into a table, like I'll apologize to it, and like people laugh at me for that. But it's like I don't know. I just feel I'm at least respecting the idea of the table, if not the spirit of the table itself.
It helps you to respect your objects as well, not just treat them like trash as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
And a lot of people actually do it to some point, but they don't see it as doing it. Like if your phone stops working and you start yelling at it, well, you're technically communicating with the spirit of your phone, but
absolutely. Yeah,
you just
absolutely.
see it as yelling at an inanimate object.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no difference in my mind. So you mentioned very briefly being a part of a like I don't want to say, I guess I'll say like a vampiric group.
Hmm.
Uh, What are some things that you learned from that that you still find applicable other than like projecting your etheric force? Is there anything else that you found that's still applicable to this day from those lessons?
I would say connection in general, because at
Okay.
that point um, I now get, once again, as stupid as it sounds, I get my energy from Lucifer. But at that point, I was feeling my health was going to shit. I was feeling very tired, and I tried, um, let's say, esoteric means of helping that too.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it probably would have worked, except that I'm very much not suited for people energy. And plants are a bit like trying to stave off starvation by chewing on a bit of celery. It's not very efficient, but I learned to sense energy. I learned to go outside and be able to put my hand on a tree and
Yes.
sense that energy moving. Um, I learned to connect with others because they used to host, I don't know if they still do, but at that point, they used to host weekly connection rituals where it's effectively like a group meditation. They're
Sure.
like a person will come in and they will um, say that you're breathing and now you're feeling like you're in a connected space and we're all together and we can all hold hands and pass the energy around, things like that. And they did actually feel an effect there. My energy work, my ability to understand other people's energy fields, my ability to connect, it all kind of came from there.
Mhm.
So being in that space gave me a good basis to start my demonolatry practice. But when I got super into going through demonolatry practice, what I noticed is that I could still come up into the connective space, but I would no longer feel connected. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
that place outlived its usefulness for me in my own spiritual journey. That doesn't
Sure.
make it a bad place. It's just that that was probably like a side room in my
Or a
own
stepping
river
stone. Yeah.
rather than,
Yeah.
the goal.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's an excellent, yeah, that is one of the more practical things that I learned from the cult of vampirism, as some people like to call it. I just think of it more of it's a facet of philosophy and magical practice. And I think that all too often people shirk and ignore the energetic aspect of the work. But for me, that's what connects the above and the below. That etheric field is like it's like a link between the astral plane and the physical plane, in my experience.
Being able to physically feel energy and connect to it is definitely a great boon if you're doing any kind of spiritual work.
Agreed.
I don't actually know how people do spiritual work without it. Like,
I don't either. I don't know. Yeah.
like I don't know how do they identify that they have correctly connected to a spirit if they can't even sense any kind of change.
Right. Right. Yeah. That I don't know either. I think it's almost like it's almost a necessary part of the work because it sort of staves off delusion. Like like when you evoke Abaddon or Belial, like and you feel it's I always explain it like it's like I put on chainmail or like someone put a wet blanket on me because the spiritual pressure in the room just multiplies. And that's
I
one way that I know. Go
I
ahead.
remember, I think it was Leviathan or one of the one wetter ones, where I literally felt like I was getting suffocated underwater. And
Uh-huh.
it wasn't the scary experience because I physically knew that I wasn't drowning, but it almost feels like you are because that's like wet pressure,
Yeah.
and there's no other way to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you need to describe it any other way. That's a very good description. Just the pressure and like feeling like you're breathing through a straw almost. It's just like, oh boy, like there's definitely something here. And if there isn't, these practices are having such an effect on my biophysiology that why not do this anyway? It's
Yeah,
effective.
that you can like still feel it, which means at the very least psychologically it's doing something to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what are some mistakes um, that you made earlier on in your practice that you would, I guess, sort of like warn people about? I guess we already sort of covered this a little bit, but I guess just in retrospect over the conversation, was there anything else that you feel was a mistake early on?
Um,
Mistake is a hard word because even though we make mistakes, they sort of enlighten us. So
there
maybe,
are no mistakes, only happy
yeah,
accidents.
there you go. Absolutely. But okay, some things that made it harder for you, perhaps.
There was a point where I really needed validation, and
Hmm.
I did not take into account that spiritual time sometimes works different.
Aha.
Because I remember having three dreams in one, which was very confusing
I
because I
imagine.
was very lucid in them, but I was very confused as to what I'm doing there.
Naturally.
Especially when the dreams would be like, a spirit approaches you and holds your hand and nothing else. And at some point in my practice, I needed validation so much that I would like ask for a sign and I would make it very, very specific. Go, I want a dream of you just being there and holding my hand. When in reality, I already had that. It's like I had those three dreams in one. And when I think back about my request to go, oh, wait a minute, because that is another thing that another practitioner has noticed that sometimes time goes very timey-wimey.
Oh
And
yeah.
you're in a process of requesting something and then you realize that you have it. But
Yes.
you don't realize that you have it in that moment and you can enter a crisis of faith. And
Yeah.
the crisis of faith is a very non-pleasant place to be in. So I would say don't live for validation. You don't
Agreed.
need the spiritual validation every single day. And also, when you're making like requests, look back and make sure that you don't already have it, because it might have happened, but it happened backwards in your timeline. And it's very hard for you to understand because for you, the time is linear. But when you're not contained by time and space, then probably both future and past are just whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that because just this week I did a spell like a money spell or like a an abundance spell or whatever. And then the next day I got a substantial check in the mail. And then I realized, and I was like, oh, like, and I was thinking the forces involved. I'm like, wait a minute, this check's been in the mail for like 3 or 4 days. Like it was already on the way
Yeah.
and then I'm like, okay, so was it my intuition that was telling me money was coming, or was it? It's just so crazy, and that's when you start to realize, like, wait a minute, time is
Time is
strange.
timey-wimey thing.
It's
It's not
timey wimey.
linear.
Yes, yes, very very good. So you mentioned Theodore Rose's Luciferian pathworking. Was there any other like film or literature or music that you would suggest to sort of help people get in the mood of understanding magic or getting more connected to their magic?
Michelle Belanger works on psychic vampirism or energy work. I would say they are very, very basic in the way that they're written because it's literally just the bottom tier of you're trying to learn how to sense things. But that will be very helpful. The Theodore Rose's book is still with me. I don't subscribe to their, I don't even know if it's a man or a woman. It might be a woman, it might be a man, but it's their writer's pen name.
Right.
And um, this thing, I don't I don't subscribe to his ideas about the spirits because every single author will have their own ideas about the spirits and they will put down their ideas about the spirits as fact. Like, you can't call upon the spirits unless. No, the very useful thing for me here was his path workings or hers, their path workings.
Their pathworking, sure.
Yeah, it was just the thing that really worked for me. And by the book's logic, you're supposed to call down the line. You're supposed to like approach one demon, then another demon, then another demon.
Huh?
I don't think that you actually have to do that. So if you are going to be using this book, just look for the path working for the spirit that you actually want to contact and screw the rest. But then again, I'm taking a very chaos magic approach here.
Sure.
But though I think at the point, okay, okay, acorns, let's go everywhere around my desk. At that point in my practice, what it made me do was when I was wanting to contact any other spirit, I had to go through Lucifer because I was new and I was following book to a T. And
Uh-huh.
honestly, because I'm a theistic Luciferian, I think that's what I was supposed to do because at some point I figured out that I can stop at Lucifer. So if it wasn't for that book entering my practice might have looked a lot different. Though
Okay.
also had a funny divination with Pyman that took a very long time to interpret. And when I interpreted, that was like a Eureka method this moment as well. But outside of that, on books, I know that if somebody is like starting out, our demonology practices Reddit, we have a frequently asked questions section, and people made a mega list of just literature. And it includes things from more philosophical, like Plato's philosophies and things like that, just so that people have a basis in like esoteric practices, to more new age books like the complete book of demonology for S. Connolly. And I would say no matter which book you take, don't internalize it as complete truth. Nobody has complete truth. Whoever tells you that they have complete truth is just trying to sell you something. Nobody has that. Instead, read several different books and figure out what works for you. Just try them out and see if it's for you. For example, I also have Gallery of Magic books. That system is very much not for me, but I did try it, and I even got a partial result from trying it. So I know that it works as a system. It's just not my system.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I've found that whenever books are like do this, do that, that tends to be for like the beginners. I think once you've awakened like that inner fire, some people call it the black flame, some people just call it like being enlightened. But once you have that sort of self-propelled, self-guiding force awakened within you, I've always sort of felt like I can just sort of skip to what I find useful. But if you don't, if it's not working for you, if you're skipping around, then yeah, maybe try to do what the author is suggesting.
I just skip the first 140 pages and go, so okay, where's all your diagrams? What are you doing? What am I
Yeah.
trying?
Yep. Skip all the theory of the ritual and get right into the ritual and find it doesn't work unless you understand it. Awesome. So, what are some things that you're looking forward to? I know this is a particularly maybe moot question for you because you mentioned you don't plan too far ahead, but what are some of your plans for the near future as far as practice goes?
Writing is always torture, but it's good because it's useful torture. So
Uh-huh.
I'm looking to the point where I finish this book on tarot. I am gonna be putting it up online as I do with all my things, and I hope that somebody will find it useful. But know that I have a timeline to finish this. And when I finish this and take a break, if I still am continuing writing and I'm alive and life is hunky dory and I don't like take a sidetrack and do something else in life, if I am still writing, there has been a hint that the next work that I would be doing, which would be like way next year, would be a book on Lucifer. And that is such a huge subject that if I
Oh yeah.
am looking forward to anything, is that I'm looking forward to buying all the material for that, looking into every single nook and cranny as I do, and to just start the phase of research for that project and to just putting down my own thoughts on paper, even if they're scary to do, even if that would just be an interpretation. But it is fun. Writing is both a torture and fun. So if I am looking into anything, so I'm looking into finishing effectively my current project and starting the next. That would be the, the expectation, the looking forward to a thing.
Okay. Yeah, I find I I wouldn't consider myself to be an author, but or anything like, but I enjoy writing. And for me, it's so much about just sitting my ass down and either making the pen move or making my fingers move on the keyboard. Because once I get going, it's like something speaks and I just listen and I just write what I hear or I write what I hear. But if I sit there and think about like, how am I going to write this? What am I going to do? I just completely knock myself out of the zone.
If I get very brave, then one day I might actually write actual fiction. But my current escapades into writing is writing occult books, and I find that to be easier because I am either following the material that is already there and trying to sum it up, or putting down an idea that's already in my head instead of trying to. For fiction writing, you need to plan out the setting. You need to figure out if that setting makes sense with the real world. If it doesn't, you have to do a whole bunch of like investigation into, well, what the world even is. And then you have to put down
Exactly.
characters, and characters have to have personalities.
Uh-huh.
Like they
Uh-huh.
actually have to be distinct people that are not you. And it is a great exercise for your brain and your imagination, but it is something that I'm not there yet. So maybe one day.
Okay. Yeah, it's an exercise in empathy to some degree to try to live in somebody else's shoes enough that you lose yourself in them.
Yeah, that you're writing someone else that's not you, but they're also believable as a human being.
Hmm.
And probably doing that more than once per book, considering that you probably have more than one character.
Yeah, depending on the story, yeah. Most stories do. Yeah. Awesome. So, well, was there anything else that you wanted to cover?
Nothing that I can particularly think of. I can give you links. I am Mirta Wake on Amazon. I am Mirta000 on Reddit. And
Okay.
I'm also Mirta000 on YouTube. With YouTube, I mostly do gaming and occult content. It's a mix and
Okay.
match. I do quite a lot of gaming because that's what the channel originally started out. But then I like entertainment. What can I say?
So
With
what kind of games do you like to play? Do you like RPGs or like adventure? Like
RPGs primarily, I would say. Simulation games also occupy a big part of my brain. There are action and shooter games that I enjoy. I really enjoy MMOs, but it's not something that I would put content out for because that is a huge undertaking.
that's a commitment.
Yeah, that is a big commitment. Um, there are more genres that I like than I dislike. I would say strategy is really not my thing unless it's something like Crusader Kings, because then family dynamics come into it. So
Okay.
then you're like, oh, I'm marrying one prince over there and the princess over there, and look, and they're making happy babies, and I can do diplomacy and thing, and that's more my thing than like outright war things.
Okay.
Um, Horror and roguelikes, I both enjoy and don't. They have a soft spot for me, but they're really not good for my heart health. So I, by
I
this
can see
point,
that.
I'm mostly staying away from them.
Okay.
The horror that's more action than horror works. So like one of the recent things was I did streams for Resident Evil Village, and I mostly enjoyed it because it was more of a shooty pew pew than it was like hide behind the railing sort of thing.
Right.
Um, yeah. And if anyone wants to drop down on Reddit, we have excellent communities there. I can't
Yeah.
recommend demonology practices enough. And I know that I know you because you dropped yourself on left-hand path, and
Mhm.
there's 3 scarabs there, I believe.
Yes.
I
I
forget his
actually
full
spoke
name.
with him
Yeah.
a few videos ago.
I know you did his interview and he really liked you. That made me remember you. So,
Good to know.
you have a Reddit presence too now.
Uh-oh. I'll have to keep that in mind, make sure that I keep my slate clean. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming and talking and having a discussion and sharing some of your life with us.
I appreciate for the chance to do so.
Awesome. Well, maybe here in like a few months or a year or something, we'll check back in and
Yeah.
see how your practice has evolved, if it has, and what's stayed the same. And yeah.
Good luck for you too. I know that you're making content on YouTube, and that is hell to ever like get an actual following in. It is very incredibly slow. And I hope that you still do find people that want to, have a chat with you. I wouldn't want to be the last one, especially considering that so many very experienced practitioners have talked to you. And then you're like, hey, look, there's a girl that has been practicing for 4 years. Here, have at it.
It was more that I found the things that you said to be either very profound or very grounded, and sometimes both. And yeah, so that was a lot of my interest. And there are currently a few more interviews lined up for the very near future, and then some lined up for a couple months from now. Some people need more time to prepare than others, or are traveling and stuff. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, you won't be the last one. But even if you are, what a great guest to have as a last guest. So
Well, thank you. And the invitation to just come over and chat on my channel.
Awesome.
always exists.
I would like
So
that.
yeah, but for now, for today, we can stop here. And
Let's do that.
if you figure out like a theme for the video, it can even be like just introducing you on your channel, then
Mhm.
just drop me a message. We'll find the time slot again.
Okay.
I don't actually know how to use Zoom because I normally use Discord. So
Okay.
that's a thing. But yeah, we can
That'll be
have
the
another.
first the first part of our video can be how to use Zoom. I'm just kidding.
It's a tutorial on using Zoom, and also, by the way, occult stuff. So yeah, we can also do a reverse video where
Cool.
where I can upload you to my channel. But for now, thank you for having me on yours,
Of course.
and I hope I'm gonna see you around.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. I hope to see you around as well. I hope you have a great rest of the week and take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.